Okay, welcome to the polish section of After Effects and this first project one. This is where things start to get a little bit cool. So we're going to jump ahead. I've been using those same kind of basic principles. There's a couple other things that you're going to see in this first playback that I'm about to do that we're going to talk about with this next batch of layers that I have over here on the left-hand side. So you can see I've got a blue, a brown, another blue, a brown, and then this sort of peachy color that we're going to start bringing in and animating. And this is going to give me a good platform to be able to talk about sort of the extra stuff that we can put in your wheelhouse while you're going through and working on these projects. Still got, a few layers up here at the top, but now we're starting to move into the 5-second mark. And again, at 8 seconds, that's when everything is going to be is going to finish up, and that's going to be our finish line for this whole thing. But let me go ahead and hit the playback so you can get an idea of what the motion looks like right now. Oh yeah, I added in some weird stuff just to make this a little bit more interesting and to make it more fun for the viewers to actually watch. So I think that's kind of a neat thing to leave in their mind as the rest of this TV that they don't know it's going to be a TV when it actually builds starts to arrive. You can see that I've got my transistors in the back. I've been able to double those guys up. I've got some cool stuff happening as the little boxes, the dark gray and light gray box start to arrive. They sort of drop down into their final position, and there's just a lot of small tight details that are going on. How did I get this eyeball to actually open up? Well, we're going to look at all that stuff in just a second here. So let's get in and let's continue animating. First thing I want to start off with is we've got this hood that's going to come into the scene. I'm going to bring my playback down, and I don't want to look at my entire animation still. Same deal. So now I'm starting to work with just a little bit of a region. I'm happy with the front of the animation, and now I really want to go through and think about what's happening for this next section here. Okay, so there it is. The eyeballs arrived. We've got our two pieces that are coming in on either side. We've got this hood piece that's going to arrive here in a little bit. Let's do that last. First up, let's go and get the front of the TV starting to arrive, and we're going to build in the monitor as that starts to show up. And this can be something really cool the way that we actually create this. So for this first piece, when it starts to close in, I've done a lot of work. I think the eyeball is really interesting, so I want to leave that up there just a little bit longer before we get it out of the viewer's perception. This is going to bring us up to just before 6 seconds. I've got my brown layer, and with that motion language that I've already established before, I'm going to go in, I'm going to set my position and my scale. Don't really need the rotation, but let's count back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's about right. And let's just bring this coming off the frame, right? So this is a bit of motion language that we've already established before, and it's going to come in. Okay, so maybe we can have it come in just a little bit faster. Give it a second for us to be able to appreciate that eyeball before it gets locked in. Yeah, and we can create a bounce on it. So the rest of the monitor is going to come in here in just a moment. So now we've locked it up. Position scale. Pull it back, and then we're going to have it just bounce back just a little bit as it actually starts to arrive. So when it hits, bounces, and it comes back. That'll work pretty good for us for what's going on with this animation. And so the next thing that's going to happen here is we've got the sort of TV reflection that's going on within our frame. So, it could be kind of fun to have this thing draw in just a moment, but we know that we've got our black screen that's going to arrive. So let's start working with mask for the first time. To be able to work with a mask within After Effects, what you're going to need to do is go in and select this little pen tool. When you've got your layer selected, it's automatically going to create a mask for you. So I'm going to go in a little bit closer here so that I can trace around this. You end up using this pen tool and these masks a lot. I think that masks are easier to be able to work with within After Effects than they are within, within Photoshop, certainly. So there we go. I'm just going to trace around this object. I'm just left clicking and holding down to be able to create curves. There's a little bit of a curve here. And what I'm doing is I'm masking around this object, and I'm going to end up copying and pasting this mask onto the other two layers so that we can have this screen arrive in sort of an interesting way. So right now I don't have the, there it goes, perfect. Okay, cool. Not really losing anything right now because it is an additive mask. I can click back over here on my manipulation arrow or hit V on the keyboard to go back into that. I'm going to turn this mask. See, when I open up my layer now, instead of just transform, mask comes up at the top. When I open that up, it says additive for the drop down. I'm going to switch this over to subtractive. And now I'm going to take this mask and let's, we'll animate it here on this layer in a sec. First, I want it to apply to the other two layers. So the next layer that I'm going to select, I've just selected my mask, hit Control C. Now I'm going to select this layer and hit Control V, and that mask arrives in the exact same spot that it is for this one. Okay, pretty good stuff. Well, no, I can see it moving just a little bit, so that's a problem. Okay. We'll work through that here right now. So if I open up my mask, open it up again, getting down to the very bottom here, we can select the mask path with all those objects selected, and then I can move up and over so that my mask is in the same spot. Okay, good stuff. Okay, so now I want to go in and select that same mask. I'm hitting Control C. I'm going to apply that mask to the front of my object. So as it actually starts to arrive and get to its final position, there it is. That's where it's going to arrive. I'm going to hit Control V on here and paste that same mask. Same idea. I want to try and line it up as best I can with its path. Okay. So I'm just going to move that mask over and try and get it lined up. Cool. So now we can start to see some of the inside of this TV starting to arrive. So we've got this green that's starting to break through on the edges. I don't really like that. So I'm just going to pull that in so we can't see it quite as much. And I can manipulate this mask shape. We don't have any keyframes on it yet, so it's not that big of a deal. And I think that visually, maybe if I do it this way, it's just going to make it look like the TV is, or the black screen is busting out just a little bit more. And I'm totally okay with that. That'll be a little bit more interesting to see. Okay, so it's kind of a wonky shape there, but let's not stress on it too much for now. And so when we go back, because we've applied that mask and we don't have any keyframe positions on the mask, as it starts to arrive in now, we've got a transparent see-through thing that comes in and it bounces. Looks pretty good, right? It's pretty interesting and pretty unique. So now we can go in and let's just get the, the reflections that are happening on this moving as well. So I can animate those in just for the heck of it. So there it goes. We're going to arrive at our final position here. Oh, thanks, John Maple. And so for this shadow that's happening within the screen, we're going to go to mask path. And so this is kind of a cool one looking at the mask paths. If you animate the shape or direction of the mask path, excuse me, it's going to, you can move it around and manipulate each one of these little points and do some really cool animations. That's how I got the eye blink to happen. I was animating each one of my points within my mask path. But the one that we're going to look at real quick is the mask expansion. This is a nice quick way to be able to get things to arrive on the screen. So instead, I'm going to lower or expand out my mask path. And as that, now when we start to actually animate this thing, let's pull it over here. Oh my gosh. There we go. So it comes in, and let's pull these guys down just a little bit more. It's taking that mask region or that direction and then either expanding it or contracting it when I actually animate it. So let's have that happen right after the bounce is finished. And we want to be maybe a little bit quicker here. Okay, so there it goes. Finishes up, and then that's going to arrive. And if we can see within the frames, there it goes. It's growing really, really rapidly. No one is going to notice it, but it's a nice little motion detail that's occurring. So now we've got the interesting part of going through and making that screen actually come in. All right, so there's our reflections on the screen. We'll start to have those arrive in some kind of interesting way as well. But let's animate with those masks the screen coming in. So we've got our mask and we can do an expansion. Let's see what happens when we start to expand it. No, nothing. Oh, there's a contract. Kind of cool. So let's switch this from the subtractive to the additive. And now let's see what happens. There we go. Now it's coming from the middle. So this guy has just arrived. It bounces, and as soon as it settles, same frame, there it goes. We want that mask expansion to start to open up. There it goes. That guy's arrived, and now we're going to close up the screen. There it is. And then if we want to, as the screen actually starts to grow, so that's happening fairly quickly, we can open up our transform and let's set the opacity. Again, I'm just having fun and sort of exploring here, sort of interesting motion paths. So I'm going to turn this opacity down to like 0%, have it arrive a little bit sooner to 100, and let's bring that playback region a little bit closer, and let's do just a quick RAM preview to make sure that that's working right. Go ahead and save. Please save often when you're working with in After Effects. And there it goes. It's starting to arrive. Oh, back to recording. Cool. So now we can see that's arriving. We got our mask working. The screen's popping in pretty quick. Looks good. And those two little white dots that are just appearing, or sorry, the white reflections, we can do something kind of interesting with them as well. So let's see what we can create. All right, so for those guys, let's use that same mask. You know, I'm going to get a lot of utility and a lot of distance out of that mask. So Control V, that's in a great spot. It's set to subtract. Let's go in, and our screen has just arrived. So we want the just to come in. Yep. Got the keyframe information now that I put on the mask that's starting to show up. Let's get rid of that keyframe information. So our mask expansion is set to 0. There it goes. And let's set this one over to subtract. So I want it to come in from the outside. And so let's get this to where those are arriving. There it goes. Cool. So 99. And for here, our screen not at 100 yet. There we go. And let's set this down to 0 so that we can't see them. And then we're going to do a scale transformation. So let's go to scale. And let's give it a little bit of bounce as it actually arrives. So there's our final scale position. At first, we want to come in from the sides to where it's a little bit bigger, get smaller. So I'm just going to scale this up to like 120, so 20% increase. And as they actually start to arrive, let's have them get a little bit smaller, a little bit tighter on the screen. And yeah, that should do us. So let's go in and extending my preview just a little bit further. You can see how I'm going to start at this point to test all our little steps. Oh, that little motion there looks pretty good as they actually arrive. I like it. And that's a great example of a spot that we can certainly use some of that easy ease to be able to keep our animation looking nice and smooth. Speaking of which, I should probably add that to the other portions of this that I am messing with. Don't need it on the opacity. There's our brown one. Yeah, so that's got some good motion that's happening, and on that bounce, keyframe assistant, easy ease. So now we've just looked at mask. We have changed our anchor points, and you can see how I'm starting to work through my entire animation. I've got those next 4 layers pretty well decided for what it is that they're going to do. You can scroll up here, and after a while you'll notice that you start to get all these layers, and it takes you a long time to be able to scroll through in After Effects. You can go through and collapse back down the layers that you're no longer using, just so that you can see within your time slider a little bit easier where all this stuff is lining up. And this is what a lot of your files are going to look like. You've got a whole bunch of different layers, and a lot of them are going to be open sometimes. But closing them up, this is how you build into really complicated animations within After Effects, right? Look at all those different colors, all those layers that we've worked through. And we've just got a few of them that are actually left. And yeah, so let's see what our next piece is. Oh yeah, we've got this piece that's going to slide in. Okay, so this is another example of where those masks can be pretty useful. So this is a top piece that's going to come in, and I'd like this to come in, since this white piece in the front's coming in on a front diagonal. I want this to come in from that back diagonal that we've already established previously in the motion. So same idea of overlapping action. So as this piece starts to actually come in, there it goes. All that other good stuff is happening. This is a good time for this to arrive in its final position. We're going to end up using a mask on this too, because there's this little blue part that's overlapping it. So let's animate this out. There it goes. That's a good angle for it to arrive on. Same deal. It gets there, and let's give it just a little bit of bounce before it arrives to its final position. All right, and let's just slide it just a little bit further. I'm using my arrow keys now to be able to manipulate this thing. Yeah, we want to go all the way up like that. Maybe a little bit further. There it is, perfect. So now that's gonna overshoot and then come back in. It should look pretty nice. There it goes. I like it. All right, so let's get the mask on there. Easy ease. And for the mask for this one, we don't want that back piece to be visible when it actually arrives. So let's grab it somewhere in the middle here. There it goes. And it's this back little corner that I want to mask out. So let's grab it. And we're going to put a little mask here. So the rest of it should disappear for now. We want to animate that mask path. So let's go to subtractive, so that when that mask is on there, this piece disappears. And I'm just going to go ahead and set a keyframe for the mask path. And let's move it forward, really backwards. We need to be able to see it. And I can grab that mask path. How is this going to work? There we go. And there we go. Okay, so you can see how I'm actually animating the individual little bits of our mask path now. So let's go in right to where this arrives, okay? There it goes. So let's slide this forward. That's where our mask path totally disappears. All right, and then before this, all right, one over. And now we can actually start to animate that mask as it shows up. Cool. So now we go one forward. Doesn't need to totally disappear yet. Sort of. Push that one over. You can see that you can get really detailed within these animations. There it goes. All right. And now it's totally gone. So now that one is going to disappear. You can see that you got a little bit of an odd keyframe right there. When you're working in a motion graphics studio, they will see all of this stuff and go through your scenes frame by frame, which if you got drop frames or anything that looks a little bit off like this, there it goes. And now our effect is working. Cool. So I'm going to give it a pause and look for some more moments to give you guys some last tips on here. One of the big ones that I can give you, I think we're in a pretty good position to be able to do this, is creating something called a null object. So I've got a null that's been created earlier within my scene, and that's going to be this yellow bar. Normally they come in just a standard color, but I always turn them over to yellow. And we can see that over here under my parents and links that all these little doodads are connected. With the null objects, I'm going to create a new one so that we see it. Let me stop. So the null object is kind of a parent link for your scene. So let's go in. We've got the exterior of this object built out, right? It's starting to look like its actual final form for the TV. Let's bring in a few more of these, see what we've got. All right, so there's our buttons. The buttons are a great example of how to be able to use a null object. So I want all of my buttons to fly in 1, 2, 3, 4, going from either the bottom to the top, and it's going to look like they just kind of get hit on the overall TV. But if I want to move all of these together, once they have keyframe information on them, we know that it auto keys, and if I'm offsetting the timing and stuff, it can become a little bit difficult to be able to readjust those positions. Instead of having to do it manually and one by one, a null object can be a really great way to be able to go in and move entire groups of layers that have keyframe information on them. Kind of a complex thing, but when you start to run into this problem, this solution is for you. So I'm going to hit Control-Shift-D. That's something we haven't really done within these demos yet, and that's going to allow me to be able to cut my piece down very quickly. Again, that's Control-Shift-D. So I go where I want within the time slider, hit Control-Shift-D, and that will separate out my my layer. It's non-destructive, so I can still pull that layer out. All the keyframe information will still be contained within that layer. I can pull it backwards, and you can hit Control-Z to be able to undo that. But that's a great way to be able to cut down these big layers into just little tiny sections that you need. So you can see that my null came in here, and it's red at first. This is why I like to turn it over to yellow. Just in my mind, yellow nulls, I use them a lot, so I always make sure that they're yellow, and then I can see them. You can see that when we first create this null object here, this little yellow box, that my position point, my anchor point, is up in the top left-hand side. That's going to create some weird scaling issues if you need to scale with the null. So please make sure that you select your coupon code looking anchor point icon up in the top. And if we double click on that, sorry, if I hold Control down and double click on it, it will center my anchor point for that null object. So now I'm going to take my buttons, just clicking one, then shift selecting the rest of them, and I want to parent those buttons to my null object. So now all of a sudden, you can see this little Naruto Leaf Village looking icon, one of my favorites in any creative program, and you can pull it, and it creates this blue line. This is what you're going to use to be able to parent stuff together. It's really great if you release it. After Effects has got a fun little animation here where it looks like a string that reverts back to itself. But I'm going to pull it over to the null too. And what we're going to see now is that when I select this null, and I'm going to hold down Shift and use my arrow keys, that all of my buttons are going to move with it. Hit Control-Z, and you can see that now that's kind of the parent that's moving this stuff back. And I'm hitting Control-Z a lot to get it back to its original position. So we've got nulls, we've got mask here, we've got some other neat little tricks for you to be able to use, scaling, changing the anchor point. There's a whole lot of just really basic core tools that you can use but this allows you to be able to create really creative animations at this point within your scenes. So I'm going to do a playback here, and let's just see how everything's kind of coming together. I'm using my middle mouse to be able to scroll around or zoom in and zoom out of my composition window. I'm holding down the space bar to get to my hand to be able to move around inside of there really quick and pan things. But yeah, so this is how the animation is coming together so far. There's that RAM preview. Let it run through once. Gets a little bit slow right there in the middle. That's okay. And I need just a little bit more time here at the end. Okay, so it looks like, let's see, there it goes, side, side, and in. Yeah, that's gonna feel pretty good. And then just as that top piece is starting to come to its final position, you guessed it, we're gonna have those buttons on the side start to fly in, and I've got a few more little pieces as we start to round it out and get to the 8-second mark. So I hope this was useful for you guys, and you've got the keywords if you need to search out some more instruction on those masks. They really are pretty powerful within After Effects. It's probably going to feel a little awkward for you at first, but keep working with them and know that that's another option for you to be able to get these objects to come in and arrive.